It was a warm summer's day in Lincolnshire in 1666. Isaac Newton sat under an apple tree. Suddenly, an apple fell from the tree and plonked Newton on the head. This got him thinking. Why did the apple fall straight down? Why not sideways? Or upwards? This was the start of Newton's journey to explain why objects move. As part of this journey, Newton discovered that every object on Earth, and everything he could see in the night sky, moved in remarkably similar ways. And he wrote 3 laws which explained how everything moved. We call these Newton's 3 laws of motion. Mary's cooking skills were unrivaled. She'd always created exquisite and delicious food. And that's why she became the most popular cook for the rich and famous families of New York City. But she was about to become famous for a very different reason. In 1906, a wave of fever swept through families all over New York, and people began to notice a chilling pattern. Wherever Mary cooked, the fever seemed to follow. Now at first, some people thought that Mary was poisoning her food. But that didn't make any sense. She seemed way too sweet to be a murderer. And eventually, they realized that Mary was accidentally spreading a deadly bacterial disease called typhoid fever. Throughout the day, you use loads of devices powered by batteries, whether you're checking socials on your phone or switching on the TV. But a lot of other devices plug directly into the wall, like your TV and kettle. We say these are powered by mains electricity, and we can follow the wires from your plug sockets out along the street, all the way to a power station. Now, this power station is not like a giant battery. Instead, it generates electricity by spinning giant turbines. This means that the circuit in your TV runs a bit differently from the circuit in your remote control. So, over the next few lessons, we're going to compare these circuits more closely. In the middle of a gigantic rainforest, the trees stand shoulder to shoulder and reach dizzying heights equivalent to a 25-story skyscraper. Here, these trees squish so closely together that the treetops form a giant blanket. This is called a canopy, and it's so packed with branches and leaves that hardly any sunlight reaches the forest floor. But why do all these trees grow so tall? Well, each tree tries to get as much sunlight as it can, so it puts lots of energy into growing taller than the trees squished next to it. And it does all this so that it can carry out photosynthesis. But what is photosynthesis? Well, put simply, it's a chemical reaction, and it's a reaction that plants need to survive. But it also produces oxygen, which humans and other animals need to survive. And all the oxygen that all the animals on Earth breathe every day comes from this reaction. In this section, we'll look at the different parts of this special reaction.
In Liverpool, in 1888, the SS Great Eastern lay beached on the bank of the River Mersey. In its prime, this ship had helped lay the first electrical cables across the Atlantic Ocean, but now it was scheduled for demolition. A crane raised an enormous wrecking ball. Then, the chief engineer gave the signal, and they released the ball. Crash! The ball shattered the ship to pieces. This was one of the first times a wrecking ball was used for demolition. But how did the engineers know how high to raise the ball? And how did they know it would have enough energy to smash the ship into pieces? Well, they just needed to calculate its gravitational potential energy and kinetic energy. And we'll look at just how to do that in this section. In the European city of Brussels, fear and distrust ran wild. It was 1634, and the townspeople had noticed that one scientist had been acting strange. Jan Baptiste van Helmont had been studying the amazing healing properties of plants. But for everyone in the town, this looked like some new evil magic, or some form of witchcraft. So the authorities arrested van Helmont and sentenced him to years of house arrest. But he swore he would continue his studies in secret. Mr. Moore stood in front of his physics class. He was about to perform a death-defying stunt. He had hung a heavy metal ball from the ceiling, and he knew that if he raised the ball and let go, it would swing with enough energy to shatter his skull. Nonetheless, he held the ball right up against his chin, and then, to the terror of his students, he let go. The ball hurtled through the air, swung back, and just touched his chin. The class breathed a collective sigh of relief, while Mr. Moore sported a smug grin. How did he know that this seemingly dangerous stunt was in fact perfectly safe? Well, it's all thanks to a fundamental law of physics called the conservation of energy.
On the 23rd of March 2020, people across Britain sat glued to their televisions and eagerly refreshing their smartphones. The nation held its breath as the Prime Minister Boris Johnson began speaking. And as his speech continued, no one could believe what they were hearing. Boris Johnson had just announced the first coronavirus lockdown. And overnight, life in Britain changed beyond recognition. Schools were closed. Everyone had to wear masks in public, and people spent their time learning new dances or watching haircutting tutorials online. For weeks, the only thing to look forward to was 8 p.m. on a Thursday, when people stood on their doorstep to clap for the doctors and nurses of the NHS. Now, the coronavirus pandemic completely changed life in Britain and around the world. But actually, the coronavirus wasn't the first devastating virus. Throughout history, viruses have been responsible for the deaths of hundreds of millions of people. And almost everyone has been infected by a virus at some point in their lives. So what is a virus? And how do they cause so much chaos? We'll answer those questions next. 2,000 years ago, near the ancient Greek city of Magnesia, a shepherd was herding his sheep. He was plodding along happily, minding his own business, when all of a sudden, he got stuck. Try as he might, he couldn't lift his sandal from the ground. What on earth was going on? Well, the shepherd thought it was an act of God. But in fact, he was standing on a particular type of rock, which was attracting the iron nails in his sandals. Nowadays, we'd call this rock a magnet, named after that ancient Greek city. Though you might be more familiar with magnets that look like this. This is called a bar magnet. But whatever they look like, we use magnets in all sorts of applications. From the speakers in your smartphone to super fast levitating trains. So let's find out how they work.